afternoon, everyone. As you're probably aware, I'm not Saturn Metals, though Saturn coincidentally are an Australian company and they actually work out of the same building that our office is also located in. So I am Australian, but that's about where the similarities end, because this is a lithium project. So this title slide shows the project. It's a sediment-hosted lithium deposit. They're an emerging class of lithium deposit. Everyone understands brines and pegmatites, but these are like the porphyry coppers of the lithium world. They're very, very large, low grade, but they have the potential to supply lithium to the United States in this particular case for decades and decades and decades. So the mineralisation in the middle of the slide there's a kind of a whole bunch of mesas that are very pale coloured. That's the lithium-rich sediments sticking out of the ground. So strip ratio is very low. Those mesas are about 30 odd metres high, and the mineralisation continues down to about 200 metres below surface so far in the thickest part of areas that we've drilled. On the kind of left-hand side of the slide, you may not be able to see it, but there's some kind of reddish, need a pointer really, reddish sort of waste dumps. That's an old mercury mine that sits just outside our claims. The area's got a long history of both mercury mining and also ranching. So the sagebrush you can see in the foreground, the ranchers run their cattle through that in the spring. So we tend to do our drilling through the summer and the autumn, so we don't interfere with their activities. So this is not pristine sagebrush environment at all. This is highly degraded, and despite what maybe some of the NGOs in the western US might say. These sediments formed within an old volcanic crater, maybe not that old geologically, about 16.4 million years old. And the rim is called the McDermott caldera, and the rim of the caldera on the western and northwestern side is that range of snow-capped mountains you can see. So without further ado, we'll launch into the presentation. Obligatory disclaimer, read that at your leisure. So look, we are focused on our lithium project. It's the McDermott lithium project. It really is a genuine tier 1 lithium deposit. We own it 100%. We identified it early 2018, left Perth, went to the US, sampled this along with about another 9 or 10 other lithium prospects we'd identified. This one, from our sampling came up trumps. We staked it, we own it 100%, beautiful clear title, no contingency payments to third parties, no royalties, nothing. You won't get cleaner title than this. We've already got a significant mineral resource, indicated and inferred 21.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. This is fresh off the press. This was Monday, this was announced in the ASX. I hopped on the plane on Tuesday to come up here. This is now the largest lithium deposit in the United States. Because of its scale, it's obviously amenable, and also its geometry, it's amenable to low-cost bulk mining. And as I said, it's got the potential to supply the US with lithium for decades and decades. Jindalee's been listed since 2002. I founded the company. I'm the largest shareholder. We've got a record of value creation. We think like shareholders, not like employees. So we've had several very successful spin-outs which have made our shareholders a lot of money, and we've always been looking for transforming projects, and we believe in McDermott. We found that project. To the point where we spun out all of our other Australian assets in a subsidiary company called Dynamic Metals, which listed in the middle of January. And we're now a pure play US lithium company. Just a company snapshot. We were a project generator, have been since we listed 2002. So that's not a typo. 57.4 million shares for a company that's been listed over 20 years is unusual, I'll say. But that's, as I said, because we think like shareholders. We've been very sensitive about excessively diluting our shareholders, and so we've got a really good bunch of high net worths that have been very, very loyal. 80% of the issued capital is owned by the top 20. At the end of the December quarter, our market cap was, at the end of, when's that date? Okay, 24th of February, market cap was 141 Aussie, so that's about 100 million US. At the end of the December quarter, we had 3.3 Aussie in cash, but that doesn't include reimbursements that are coming our way from our Dynamic Metals spin out that I mentioned that we listed Dynamic in middle of January. As I said, I'm the largest shareholder. I've never sold a share since we listed. I've only ever bought. I'm a huge believer in the company, and I really strongly believe that McDermott's going to be a transforming project for the company. I won't spend too much time on the board other than to say behind the board and our the headshots, if you like, of management there are a whole bunch of consultants and contractors, US based, who we don't want poached, and so I haven't put them there. They're hard to get. You get good people, you look after them and you keep them. As I said, we've spun out all of our Australian assets as Dynamic Metals, which listed on ASX middle of January, which leaves Jindalee as a pure play US lithium company focused on our McDermott project. We've got another prospect, I'll call it, Clayton North, which is also a sediment-hosted prospect, but McDermott's the name of the game. It's huge. So I won't spend too much time on the lithium supply demand, other than say obviously the electrification of not only the United States but Europe, China is driving huge demand for lithium, and there's a deficit, and that's driven the price up from around probably $10,000 a tonne for lithium carbonate when we stake the ground to where we sit today at around about $65,000 a tonne, depending on where you get your price from. I should say that's a spot price. The long-term contract prices are a bit lower than that, and it's all driven by EVs and also merging with stationary storage for green energy, solar and wind. Jennifer Granholm, who is the head of the Department of Energy, huge supporter. The politics of and you'd probably know it better than I would, being just having the US on your border, but the politics of lithium in the United States, in fact critical minerals generally, are just super positive, with very strong support from the Department of Energy. So she's a real champion for critical minerals. And battery factories are obviously already exist. Everyone's heard of the Gigafactory, but they're being built, most of them in joint ventures between US automakers and mainly Korean battery makers. And you'll see later in the presentation we've signed an MOU with POSCO. POSCO are really keen to get involved in the manufacture of batteries in the US, and they've got a joint venture with General Motors, 50-50, to supply cathode active material, including lithium, to GM. Just on the bottom of the slide there, bottom left-hand corner, the US currently produces around 5,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate per annum. Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, who are probably the leaders in analysis of the lithium sort of supply-demand situation, estimate that the US, to supply these battery factories, will need around 600,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate by 2031. Now, where's that lithium going to come from? Obviously, Canada's doing a great job, in Quebec and Ontario in particular, with pegmatite-hosted lithium, but the US, it's not going to be enough, and the US is going to need these very large, low-grade, long-life projects to meet demand. And we're starting to see funding of these sediment-hosted deposits. The Rhyolite Ridge deposit received a grant of $700 million US for its for its project mid-January, and the Thacker Pass deposit, which is just to our south, owned by Lithium Americas, they announced an investment by GM, $650 million, in return for offtake from Thacker Pass, and also more recently announced that they expect to receive 75%, up to 75% of the capital costs of their project as a grant from the Department of Energy. So these are happening, these are real, these sediment deposits are going to be developed. As you can read the slide, but there's strong bipartisan support. Probably at the end of March, when President Biden signed the Defence Production Act, that was a really strong signal that it was on. This was first invoked during the Korean War, so to supply critical materials for the war effort. It's a very strong act. Obviously, the Inflation Reduction Act became law middle of August, and that it's brought with it not only a lot of funding for these critical minerals projects from the Department of Energy and also from the Department of Defence, but it's also there's a mandate that basically the supply of critical minerals used for these lithium-ion batteries must either be sourced in the US or from free trade partners like Australia and Canada to qualify for the EV tax credit. And probably the last point there, $40 billion available from the Department of Energy's loan guarantee slush fund. And we're seeing, as I said, a Rhyolite Ridge awarded a conditional loan of $700 million US. Note that the size of their resource, 1.3 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent, versus our McDermott project of 21.5 million tonnes. So we're very, very confident that this project is going to be funded. And then obviously you see there that Lithium Americas announced that they, very recently, that they'd received a letter of completion from the Department of Energy and expect to see up to 75% of their project funded via Department of Energy grant and loans. So a bit about the project. I mentioned it's in the McDermott Caldera. That's shown there in the yellow dashed line. We're at the northern end of the caldera. Lithium Americas Thacker Pass deposit at the southern end. Same geology. As I said, we identified the area. We actually identified it late 2017, but we had to wait for the snow to melt before we, hopped on a plane and flew over. So we sampled it in March 2018. Got very anomalous results from our sampling. It was open ground. We staked it in April, and the claims are granted in June. And in September we did proof of concept drilling. This area had never been drilled before, even though obviously it was sitting in the same caldera geological structure as the Thacker Pass deposit. We drilled 4 holes 2 kilometres apart. All 4 holes intersected significant lithium intercepts from surface. So it was concept proved, and from then we've just drilled each year. Through COVID, when we couldn't travel from Australia, we managed our programs remotely for 2 years. And each year that we've drilled, the project's got bigger and bigger. So a total of 62 holes have been drilled there now, about half RC, half diamond. And that's, as I said, led us to a resource announcement on Monday of 21.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. So our previous resource, 2022, was 13.3 million tonnes lithium carbonate equivalent. So that made it the second largest lithium deposit in the US. You can see there a mixture of indicated and inferred, the indicated in yellow, the inferred in red. And what we did through the end of last year, we drilled 21 holes, mainly to infill inferred to convert that to indicated. But we also drilled some holes stepping out to the west of the resource. It was a very successful program. I just did, general rig shots there, what it looks like on the ground. As I said, it's not pristine world in this country at all. Highly successful program. 180 odd metres of continuous mineralisation on the very western edge of the resource from 21 metres, and then outside the resource another 130 odd metres of 1200 ppm from 20 odd metres below surface. And then on the eastern side of the resource there's a couple of RC holes I've shown there with pretty good widths of good grade lithium from surface. So it's a fantastic deposit. Oh, just the section there, it's a vertical exaggeration of 5 times, just to show the sediment sitting on top of a volcanic basement. So when we hit the basement, it's crunchy, it's hard, it's dark green. We know that's there's no point in drilling any further. So the geology is relatively simple, actually, I have to say. And very continuous, as you can see from that section. Very highly predictable deposit. Everywhere we've drilled, every single hole we've drilled, we've got lithium in it. So, I mean, how big do you want to make it? It's still open, but we've probably got 100 years mine life ahead of us already. So this is what the new resource looks like. You can see there yellow indicated, red inferred, still open out to the west. Mixture of a bit over 50% of the resources now in the indicated category, and we now have applied for a permission to go and do some more infill drilling to convert indicated to measured and more of the inferred to indicated, and ahead of probably mine planning, I'd say, through late this year and into next year. So yeah, it was a very successful program. 21 holes gave us a lot of leverage. There's no point having a huge lithium deposit if you can't get the lithium out of the ore. Well, it doesn't. If it can't get it out, it's not ore, is it? It's waste rock. So there's 2 main methods that are used or being investigated to sort of process or extract the lithium from this style of mineralisation. So acid leaching, either using sulfuric or hydrochloric acid. This is the route using sulfuric acid that's proposed for the Thacker Pass deposit, owned by Lithium Americas, and the Rhyolite Ridge deposit owned by Ioneer. And then the Sonora deposit in Mexico, owned by Ganfeng. They're proposing alkali salt or sulfation roasting to extract the lithium from the ore. So we've trialled both of these metallurgical processes, and we've had excellent results from both. The beauty of our ore is you can beneficiate it. So using using attrition scrubbing with hydrocyclones, which is a bit like what they use for treating mineral sands deposits. Except we want the slimes. In mineral sands, they throw away the slimes and they just keep the clean sand. We want the slimes because they contain the bulk of the lithium. So we can get a significant upgrade by using beneficiation, and then very, very high extraction rates, 97% within 2 hours. And we got also, we're able to demonstrate alkali salt roasting works. So currently we've got a major engineering group who're familiar with US lithium, sediment-hosted lithium deposits, reviewing all the met test work, and we hope to be able to share the results from their review later this month. I also announced we've signed an MOU with POSCO. Importantly, this is non-binding, so we have absolutely no obligation to transact with POSCO. They don't have any offtake agreements, they don't have any equity in the project, they don't have any equity in Jindalee, but they're going to spend $2 million treating our ore, testing a number of processing routes, and at the end of that 6-month period, they're going to sit down with us and we can have a chat and see if we want to take things to the next stage. They're very ambitious, POSCO. Obviously, I mentioned that they've announced their JV with GM to supply cathode active materials, and they want to be as big in battery materials by 2030 as they currently are in steel. We're in the Western US. You've got to behave yourself, keep your nose clean. Importantly, through last year, we conducted very extensive environmental and cultural studies. and important to note, there were no red flags raised from that work. If there's one slide you should remember, this is it. Picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, this is probably worth 2,000. This shows the McDermott deposit relative to our other sediment-hosted peers, and more importantly, probably on the right-hand side of the screen, is our market cap as it was, at the time this presentation was prepared in February, so maybe a week or so ago, compared to the other more advanced projects. I just looked at the explorers, so Clayton Valley, Tonopah, Big Sandy. They are valued, well, they were valued at about $300 Aussie per tonne of lithium carbonate equivalent. When this presentation was prepared, we were valued at $10 a tonne. If we were valued at the same rate as them, $300 a tonne, our share price would be about $70 Aussie. In fact, now with the resource update, it would be closer to $100 Australian. So when I say up there we're undervalued compared to our peers, we certainly are. And this is because we've been flying below the radar, just quietly going about our work, but it's now time to share the story with North American investors. So what's coming up? So we announced the resource upgrade last on Monday. We've got the studies into the MET test work underway, and we should be able to share the results from that in later this month. We've lodged a plan of operations that was lodged mid-January after having completed all the baseline studies. That's for up to 270 holes. So if we get that, or most of that approved, that would be a huge green light for the project, I believe, from investors' scepticism point of view. Detailed studies, that's probably going to be a PFS, given the size of the resource and what we think is coming in the metallurgical studies. And then all going well, assuming our plan of operations is approved, expect a major drilling program to commence in the September quarter. We're building and strengthening the team both in the US and obviously at the board level. There were several new appointments to the board, the management slide. And I mentioned the MOU with POSCO that was signed last month. And we're continuing to engage with other US end users and strategics.